Big steps taken towards wrapping up the New Orleans Saints coaching staff. Let's talk about the big news. Let's talk about what's new. And let's talk about what's next for the New Orleans Saints. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that we're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, Canal Street Chronicles, Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. In today's Locked On Saints, we get to kick it off with the official news that the New Orleans Saints are moving ahead with co-defensive coordinators in Kris Richard and Ryan Nielsen. Let's talk about why this should have been the choice all along, even though it is a little risky. We're going to start with the coordinators here. So we know the offensive coordinator is going to be Pete Carmichael. He retains that role. They give him over play calling responsibility. And then now you have this big shift over at defensive coordinator with Dennis Allen having been elevated to head coach. They fill the vacancy with not one, but two personnel, coaching staff personnel. And they do that with secondary coach Kris Richard, defensive backs coach, as well as defensive line coach and former assistant head coach Ryan Nielsen. Now, Richard and Nielsen will retain their position coaching responsibilities, Richard with the secondary, and then Nielsen, of course, with the defensive line. But Ryan Nielsen's assistant head coach tag now goes to special teams coordinator Darren Rizzi. You remember we talked about this over the course of the week, that would be the thing that would just simply make the most sense. Darren Rizzi, after all, did interview for the Saints head coaching position along with Dennis Allen. They asked Pete Carmichael to interview. Pete Carmichael said, nah, I'm cool where I am. And now, of course, he's all set at offensive coordinator. But Darren Rizzi gets a little bit of a bump because this has been one of the best special teams coaches and coordinators in the NFL for the last over 10 years at this point. He had a 10-year stint with the Miami Dolphins. He's been with the Saints for a few years now, and he has consistently put up the number one, number five, let's say top five special teams unit every year that he has been around, and he's been phenomenal, along with his assistants and the rest of the staff that's over there as well. So much deserved for Darren Rizzi moving up to assistant head coach, along with carrying that special teams coordinator role. But now the defensive coordinator role in New Orleans would be handled by two coaches, Kris Richard and Darren Rizzi. Now, Kris Richard and Ryan Nielsen. Dennis Allen, in his introductory press conference, mentioned that he has a desire to maintain defensive play calling in his wheelhouse. I think that would be smart to continue that. Dennis Allen, of course, called all the plays on defense when he was the defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints since 2015. Anyway, keep him with that responsibility. He's done a magnificent job there. We've talked before about the way that you can split up Kris Richard and Ryan Nielsen's responsibilities in terms of game planning, but there is another extra piece that you could look at when it comes to Kris Richard. One of the things that Dennis Allen has consistently praised Richard about is for helping to turn the New Orleans Saints defense last year in terms of its production in the red zone, or limiting production in the red zone, one of the top three units in red zone defense last year. And a lot of the praise, a lot of the reason for that is Kris Richard, or at least has gone Kris Richard's way. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Richard involved in some way or another when it comes to defensive play calling, or at least defensive situational decision making when it comes to red zone defense. I would not be surprised to see that at all. Otherwise, the split of pass game coordinator, run game coordinator makes a ton of sense over on the defensive side. Have Kris Richard prepare the defense for the upcoming opponent's passing game, while Ryan Nielsen prepares the defense for the upcoming opponent's run game. And then you've got a pretty good synergy there as long as you can keep the division of labor really clearly defined. That's where things can get a little messy. That's where you can get a little Minnesota Vikings 2020, 2021, right? Andre Patterson as well as Adam Zimmer, they struggled a little bit as co-defensive coordinator with Mike Zimmer still calling the defensive plays there in Minnesota. The Saints will have to avoid that, but they should be able to with better synergy, better cohesion, better communication, and honestly, just better personnel over on the defensive side when it comes to the players. It helps to have effectively a player coach at all three levels of the defense in Cam Jordan, in Demario Davis, and of course in Malcolm Jenkins, going from defensive line back to the secondary. So I do think that the Saints are in a better position than the Minnesota Vikings were, but they still have to get things right in order to in order to avoid the pitfalls that come with co-defensive coordinator situations. Which, if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know that I've ever heard of co-defensive coordinators in the NFL, you're absolutely right. It's not something that's very common in the NFL. It's a lot more common in college. And so this is going to be a bit of an experiment. I think we're all going to kind of be in wait and see mode when it comes to this. But honestly, if you're talking about two guys that could work together in doing this, Kris Richard, Ryan Nielsen, they should definitely top the list of the candidates around the NFL. Because I think that Kris Richard has done a good job training up the secondary to be tacklers, to play good, to play well in the run game. And I think that that accompanies and sort of complements what Ryan Nielsen has done in turning the New Orleans Saints into a top 5 run unit each year since 2018, 1 year after he showed up in New Orleans in 2017. And I think that Ryan Nielsen has done a great job bolstering the pass rush for the New Orleans Saints since he showed up in 2017. Again, no seasons with less than 40 sacks since Ryan Nielsen has been a New Orleans Saints defensive line coach. And that, of course, helps your passing game, your pass defense as well, if you can get pressure on the quarterback. So there's already a bit of a symbiotic relationship between the two coaches. Now, can they carry it out into game plans week to week, day to day? Now, there weren't just changes at the coordinator spots for the New Orleans Saints. They also had some position coach changes and elevations as well, including one big promotion for a guy that we continue to tout here on the podcast, Ronald Curry. Let's talk about what's new for him and what's new for the New Orleans Saints coming up next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at betonline.net, the #1 place to go for all of your betting needs. Whether you're looking for news, analysis, podcasts, they've got you there. If you're looking for the newest and most up-to-date odds, lines, and props, they've got you covered there as well. Especially, I know football season is over, but if you want to bet on where Aaron Rodgers goes next, if not as a Green Bay Packer, where Russell Wilson goes next, if not as a Seattle Seahawk, you can get in on all that. And of course, there's basketball, pro and college hoops for you to get in on, as well as the UFC, MMA, boxing, hockey, hopefully baseball right around the corner. A ton to bet on and a ton of fun to be had over at betonline.net. So make sure you go and check them out so you don't miss any of the exclusive offers that are available there all the time. Once again, it's betonline.net, the exclusive online betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out that Locked On NFL YouTube page. Everything you need to know from the local experts on a national level across the NFL in less than 30 minutes, as well as a ton of fun stuff that we always have going on over there, as well as all of our Super Bowl Radio Row interviews as well over on the Locked On NFL podcast. So go and check that out. Free and available on all platforms as well as on YouTube. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what the New Orleans Saints did beyond just the coordinator spot. Obviously, head coach, coordinator, those things have kind of dominated the news cycle for the New Orleans Saints over the course of the offseason, but it's not limited to just them. It's limited to very important decisions being made at the position coaches as well. And you have a couple of new arrivals and one big promotion that I think will help the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints I think have done themselves some favors over on the offensive side. Think about this. Where did the New Orleans Saints have the most trouble, regardless of injury, last year in 2021? The wide receiver spot, right? Regardless of injury, I mean, you can talk about Michael Thomas not making it out onto the field and make that a part of injury, sure. But even behind Michael Thomas, you never really had an established number 2 that was ready to come into the season. You certainly didn't have an established number 1 ready to take over for Michael Thomas. And the New Orleans Saints just haven't really invested highly at that spot. I mean, outside of Michael Thomas, you've had basically undrafted free agents that are going out there, and Traquan Smith, who was drafted in the 3rd round, who wasn't available at the beginning of the season. So for that spot to be addressed over the course of the offseason, you're going to need somebody that's going to help to push the narrative and push the envelope a little bit about why the position needs to be paid attention to and why the position needs to be addressed with greater attentiveness, right? Whether it be through free agency or through the draft, whichever. And that's why I think the hire of wide receiver coach Kodi Burns, who spent 1 year with the Tennessee Volunteers, helped to completely revitalize Cedric Tillman's season and really collegiate career. Same thing for Velus Jones, who saw his career high in catches as well as receiving yards under Kodi Burns with that staff. And then you look back to the Auburn days, what he was able to do with the wide receivers there, Anthony Schwartz, Seth Williams, Tutu Atwell as well. And these are guys that were in Gus Malzahn's system, which wasn't really that great. So you look at what it is that everybody has to say about Kodi Burns, and it's nothing but positives. Everybody loves the guy. He was a former wide receiver himself. He caught a huge touchdown from Cam Newton in the national championship win for Auburn when he was a player. So the guy knows the position, whether it's because he has played it or because he's teaching it or because he's developing it or because he's helping to install it. I think he was a great decision for the Saints. And he's a young guy, 33 years old. Like I mentioned, I just turned 32 just a few days ago, effectively, a couple of weeks ago now. And at that point, at 33 years old, what is he thinking? He's looking at the future of the NFL. He understands where the NFL is headed. And I think that having that sort of injection of youth into that offensive staff is a very important aspect as well. You see it with Ronald Curry, who also played wide receiver and quarterback and was a basketball star and all the other things. Now, why am I bringing up Ronald Curry? Ross, you talk about Ronald Curry all the time. Yes, because I think Ronald Curry is going to be a head coach in the NFL someday. He'll certainly be a coordinator in the NFL someday. And it starts with the way that the New Orleans Saints have treated him, right? They brought him in as a wide receiver coach a couple years ago, elevated him to quarterback coach last year. This year, he gets another promotion, and it's a big one because they're moving him up to pass game coordinator as well. So he'll be the quarterback coach working with, hopefully, Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, potentially Blake Bortles and Ian Book, whoever that fourth quarterback is going to be, along with Ian Book, Taysom, and Jameis, hopefully Jameis. And not only will he be doing that, but he'll also be working to install on game days or throughout the game plan install as well as the pass game coordinator. So he will have a much larger role going into 2022. And I think that is a good thing for him. And again, they're setting him up just like Sean Payton said that they would. They're setting him up to continue to allow him to progress into being an offensive coordinator. And they're fast tracking him, I mean, you look at him at wide receiver coach one year, the next year he's quarterback coach, next year he's quarterback coach and pass game coordinator. There's only one step left after this, effectively, is to move him into some type of offensive coordinator position, which doesn't have to be with the Saints. It could be that they're setting him up elsewhere and everything. And that's what the New Orleans Saints are all about, right? They've always been about trying to make sure that they are moving the dial for the guys that dedicate themselves to the franchise. And you've seen that before, not just with a guy like Ronald Curry, but you saw that with Doug Marrone as well, who came in 2006 as the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, also spent some time working with quarterbacks, working with offensive line, doing all that. And now they bring him back as the offensive line coach. And I think that's a fantastic move for the New Orleans Saints because, and you have to factor injuries in here. If you look at the other place where the Saints had the most trouble outside of wide receiver, it's probably the offensive line. You can go to quarterback too, because they had to start 4 different quarterbacks due to injury. So if we're factoring injury back in for the offensive line, you have to in the quarterback spot. I get that. But if you look at the non-quarterback situations, offensive line was decimated throughout the 2021 season and honestly still kind of struggled even with the starters. Ryan Ramczyk wasn't fully himself. Teron Armstead wasn't fully himself. Cesar Ruiz has not really taken any steps forward. Now you bring in Doug Marrone, who knows the winning culture of the New Orleans Saints because he was with them from 2006, 2007, 2008 before he ended up departing and then becoming a head coach somewhere with the Jacksonville Jaguars later on down the road. And that was something that we had always waited to see. When will the Sean Payton coaching tree take off? And Doug Marrone was really the first one. And now we still haven't seen the Sean Payton coaching tree take root anywhere else, but maybe Detroit and maybe Los Angeles, and then still in New Orleans, right? Because all those other guys are staying in New Orleans. So Doug Marrone comes back to New Orleans. I think he's going to be great for the offensive line. He knows the winning culture of the New Orleans Saints. He knows what to demand. He is a great developer of offensive line talent. He's also a great evaluator of offensive line talent. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's able to do with guys like Cesar Ruiz, as well as the guys that he could help take another step forward, like Eric McCoy, Ryan Ramczyk, into the next phase of his career. Potentially even Andrus Peat taking a step forward would be great to see. And then whatever's going to happen at the tackle spots, right? Is Ryan Ramczyk going to move to left tackle and then James Hurst start at right tackle? They're going to find a new left tackle if Teron Armstead isn't re-signed. And then if Teron Armstead comes back, then you pair him back up with Doug Marrone or you pair him up with Doug Marrone. I think that's a great opportunity for him as well. So I think that what the Saints have done beyond just the coordinator spot might be just as important because of the way that impacts the individual positions where they've struggled in that 2021 season. And even the elevation of Ronald Curry to pass game coordinator, the passing game was not all that we expected it to be in 2021, mostly because of injuries at the quarterback position and them changing play styles because Taysom has a different play style than Jameis, for instance. But you look at where they struggled in the passing game. And I think elevating Ronald Curry into that pass game coordinator while you've got Pete Carmichael calling the plays and building the offense, I just think it's a really, really fantastic structure for the New Orleans Saints moving forward. So the coordinators are in place. You've seen some elevation, some changes at position groups, particularly over on the offensive side. What's next for the New Orleans Saints? Well, they still have one key position to fill on their coaching staff, which is going to be a very, very important one. And of course, a huge player personnel problem still left to solve. Let's talk about both of those as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a look at what's next for the New Orleans Saints as they continue to fill out their coaching staff, coordinator, position coaches, all in a better place unless there are any upcoming changes now that the co-defensive coordinators, Ryan Nielsen and Kris are in place. But there's still one key spot that needs to be filled on the coaching staff and one major personnel question left to be asked, of course, when it comes to player personnel. Let's start with that key spot on the coaching staff. Strength and conditioning coach. So the New Orleans Saints parted ways with Dalrymple, who has been their strength and conditioning coach for a long time. He was a 2-time strength and conditioning coach of the year within a decade at one point. So they ended up parting ways with him. And we've seen more and more injuries creep in for the New Orleans Saints over the course of these past few years. It's not entirely up to strength and conditioning. That's up to medicals. That's up to individual medicals. That's up to individual health, stuff like that. So I don't know that it's really connected to the injury problem that the New Orleans Saints suffered back in 2021, but I do wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that they've had to start 58 different players and maybe Dalrymple was just a little tired, which I would completely understand, right? So was Sean Payton, right? We all know if he was tired, but he was certainly at a situation where he was like, I'm going to step away for at least a season here, keep it buck. But now the New Orleans Saints are looking for a new strength and conditioning coach after, for whatever reason took place, moving on from Dalrymple. So right now, according to Nick Underhill, the Saints are interested in, or seem to be interested, in Alabama's Director of Sports Performance, David Ballou, as well as the Director of Sports Science, Matt Rhea. So this would be great. These are two of the best when it comes to sports performance and sports science in the collegiate football realm. They have worked for a top program, a program that continuously produces pro talent and what is effectively a pro program in college. Now, I'm not saying that Alabama could beat the New York Jets because I don't think that they could. But when it comes down to it, Alabama is putting out the best production when it comes to college players. I mean, let's be real, right? They're putting out and creating and fostering some of the best talent in the NFL, or some of the best talent to potentially move to the NFL, and a lot of them do. So when you look at the potential here of plugging in some of the better strength and conditioning style coaches, sports performance, sports science coaches in the collegiate realm into the NFL, whether that be for strength and conditioning or some balance of strength, conditioning, performance, and sports science that they might try to introduce. We know that the Saints are very well ahead when it comes to their usage of data and analytics, particularly in practice, right? They were the first team in the NFL to use and deploy Zebra Technologies practice solutions in practice, right? To where they were able to track and see how much these guys were running. They were able to figure out that Reggie Bush was working too hard, and they were able to throttle him back a little bit, extend his career a little bit. So you look at the way that the Saints utilize that information, bringing in these guys that are a little bit more data heavy, that are a little bit more kind of the world of analytics, I think is really important as well. So we'll see. That would be either one of them or some combination of them would be a really interesting addition to help to fill out the rest of the coaching staff. And that would be it. That would be the end of the additions, unless anything were to happen to where, you know, Kris and Ryan Nielsen say, hey, we want to move on from this person on the defensive staff or something like that, or we want to bring and add this person in, right? The Saints usually do a pretty good job of bringing in new interns, bringing in new assistants, defensive and offensive assistants, things like that each year. So maybe we'll see some of those end up getting added. But outside of that, the wider, more broad, wide swath changes to the coaching staff should be done at this point. So the next piece for the New Orleans Saints is figuring out who their quarterback is going to be in 2022. And I'll just say it now so that it's said and so that everybody knows that I'm still on the same page here, because I want to make sure that you understand that I am remaining consistent, even though we are exploring all of the different things. We're going to get some help from our friend Corbin Smith over at Locked On Seahawks. He's going to send us a little something that we're going to use in the episode to talk a bit about, or in an upcoming episode to talk a bit about what it would take to get Russell Wilson to the New Orleans Saints. But for me, if I had to pick right now on February 24th on this wonderful, wonderful, beautiful Thursday, I would say that the New Orleans Saints quarterback in 2022 is Jameis Winston, right? That just makes the most sense, especially with the Saints being so focused on cohesion and continuity, familiarity, all of that. You look at the head coaching position, the offensive coordinator position, the defensive coordinator position, even the offensive line coaching position, right? Bringing Doug Marrone back, there's familiarity there, there's some continuity there, whatever. And so I think that just makes the most sense. It fits the theme of what the New Orleans Saints offense has been so far. And the only other quarterbacks out there that aren't currently on the roster that fits that mold is Teddy Bridgewater. That's it. So if you're going to give me Teddy Bridgewater or Jameis Winston, I'm going to take Jameis Winston because I'm going to take high variance in the passing game all day, especially if you're going to have a new focus on the offensive line, if you're going to have, or a refined focus on the offensive line, if you're going to have a new focus at wide receiver, if you're going to have a new focus in the passing game with Ronald Curry, and you're going to have this, new version of Sean Payton's offense with Pete Carmichael to see what kind of changes there. And you're still going to have this, hopefully this great defense based on the personnel that you still have, the talent that you still have, and the coaches that you still have. Then yeah, give me the variance. 100% give me the variance with Jameis Winston. I will take that 10 times out of 10. Of course, as I always say, we'll have to wait and see how his recovery goes, how his rehabilitation goes, and when he gets cleared. He ain't getting signed nowhere until they have an understanding of, can he play in 2022, right? And so far, if you see all the training videos, you see the work that he's been doing, you see the videos that are being put out, so far, so good. So far, so good. So far, there's no reason to look at it and say, well, that's not going to happen because X, Y, and Z. So far, everything's looking good for Jameis Winston, and that would only mean good things for the New Orleans Saints, who will probably have to outbid some teams if they want to keep him, right? Or they're going to have to provide him with the reasons to pick them instead, right? That outbidding doesn't necessarily mean monetary. They might have to outbid with their value, right? And with his value, 14 touchdowns to 3 interceptions in a system that he would basically return to, not have to learn new language for, not have to learn new lingo for, not have to learn new plays for, anything like that. I think that's pretty appealing for a guy that was in the midst of resurrecting his career, at least for that 2021 season, before the unfortunate injury ended his season. Expect the Steelers to be in on him. Expect the Bucks to be in on him. Expect the Washington Commanders now to be in on him. I think the Saints are going to have to do a little bit of bidding, right? They're going to have to do a little bit of work, but keeping Jameis Winston, I think, is going to be where they head next. But that quarterback spot is going to be the next biggest piece for the New Orleans Saints to fill out. We'll talk about it more tomorrow, right? We'll dig in a little bit further. What are some of the other options out there? If we can, we'll get Corbin involved in terms of talking about what it would take to trade for Russell Wilson. He's got a very, very good inside look at that. So we'll talk about all of that and some other possibilities at the quarterback spot, because that's where all the eyes now turn to, since the New Orleans Saints coaching staff is mostly filled out at this point. So we'll get to that tomorrow. And of course, continue to keep you up to date with everything going on with your New Orleans Saints. We've also got Sean Payton to talk about. Is he going to be on Fox next season? Is he going to be there? Is Drew Brees going to be there? Drew Brees and Sean Payton competing with one another for the same job? So we have a lot of stuff to talk about tomorrow. So we'll get to all that and keep you up to date with everything going on with your New Orleans Saints here on Locked On Saints. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go and check out that Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Eric Crocker, Ryan Tracy, giving it to you. Everything that you need when it comes to the NFL Draft, mock drafts, position rankings, other stuff, draft things, whatever it is that you need, they've got you taken care of over at Locked On NFL Draft. Find it free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And for everything you need around the New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at RossJackson, NOLA. I don't know if I did that right, but it's all good. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.